So I want to talk about briefly, well, more not exactly briefly, about 3D printing medications and pills and some similar stuff, and how I think this could lead to a revolution in medicine for many ways, and how to do it maybe in the future, and how it can help people that are disabled in a variety of means. First, I want to go over about the means, and later on I'll go over more about how to do it, potentially. And later I'll go over other related ideas. Well, one thing that I could do and help out is something called compounding. So, roughly. So some people have taken a bunch of different types of medications, and you can sometimes get custom-made medications that are a combination of all the different medications you have to take. Now, this can help with a lot of people that have issues if you have a ton of medications keeping track, if you have executive dysfunction, so it's hard to maintain it. Stuff it can help if you have it can help just mean less space in your house to take care. It can help if you need to take the doses at a very, very similar time. It can make it easier to swallow or just to manage in a variety of ways. And it might even make it a little cheaper. It also can reduce waste because there's less stuff in each pill. So a bunch of huge advantages right there. Another thing you could help is with 3D printing is you can make it have different ways of releasing the medication in more ways. So you can have it that it all dissolves very quickly, or all dissolves slowly, or have it have different dissolutions that first it dissolves quickly, then slowly, or in all sorts of patterns, and even have mixtures of different medications within the medication dissolve in different ways with different compartments or fancier things like that. So huge potential there to give it more better releasing. And now how much it releases is not only can cause many different things. So if it releases different parts of the digestive tract can absorb stuff to different extents. It can also cause it for you to have a quick dose to make you feel better, and a longer dose to keep you feeling at the same time. Or another complicated pattern, slowly releases it and quickly releases at the end when your body's built up some resistance to it. You can think of a variety of things like that. Another thing that could help with is it could actually make it so that you don't gag as much on it, or you can make a small one for people with swallowing troubles and stuff like that. Or you can make it so it shapes or something that people get less repulsed by it. You can make it also have different types of textures and stuff like that, which could be very important for some people that are very texture sensitive and don't like swallowing certain types of medications, or if they have a particularly sensitive throat or something. And yes, there are people with extreme texture aversions that can barely take down medications or gagging problems. Another thing it could help a lot with is that it could make it a more viable thing for people to build or take at home when you don't have to go out as much to do it. You just have a delivery of the raw basic ingredients, which you will maybe need less often because you can have something last a lot longer because of how compact something is, or that only the expensive, the active ingredient stuff is what you have to order every couple of years or something, while the other ones are a lot easier to get. You can also, making it at home can make stuff happen that is sensitive, so it won't last as long, or so you have to make it the same day. Having the whole thing be made in front of your eyes might remind you more, stuff like that. You also would get rid of transporting this stuff as much, because you don't have to transport a bottle that's mostly empty space or all this other stuff back and forth, which could actually be more environmentally friendly and less compact, make stuff more compact. It might be easier for you to keep records if it was made nearby or at home, and the device itself could back up records and say exactly how it's made better. You could also print it to have a variety of shapes and colors and texts and stuff, and even inscriptions and stuff, so it's more easily ID'd by you or other people to help you keep track of your medications better. Or maybe even other people if you want to write something fancy on it, and can. Another thing that could happen with this whole device is it could lead to better, what I'm going to call better updates on everything to make the technology more advanced or something. Or it could give, or just the, now that can mean anything from changing up the mixtures of what's in the pill. And inactive ingredients can have a huge effect, because inactive ingredients could have can affect solubility or react or speed delivered or help calm upset stomachs. But it could also affect fancy things like 3D printing for release times and stuff like that. It could affect it software updates, so does its job better and stuff. But it could also mean that you could have the same medication changed up depending on your exact condition. So maybe sometimes you want a fast release form, sometimes you want a slow release form. So you can build you 2 different types of medication based on it, or change out how it compounds medications for different needs and uses as they rise for you. The 3D printer might even be able to use for other uses besides printing the medication. That's also another idea that's out there. One idea that is out there that isn't too ridiculously out there either is that sometimes people have weird reactions to certain things in medication with inactive ingredients and stuff. Now, these are not common, but for these people, these can be disastrous. And you need to go to get medication specially made. Now, this can be very expensive. Not only is it very expensive, it's not well controlled by many people. So many people that go to these places get ripped off and it have a horrible time and will get fucked over. So, good thing there. Coloring, we can make the colors more appealing, or change up the coloring for someone that's colorblind or can't see colors as well, or even make the coloring more appetizing so you feel less averse to it. So, this is a little bit of an odd one, is that we have now some evidence that during certain times of day, medication, or depending on other factors, medication is absorbed differently or acts with your body differently. It's everything from digestive to metabolism to actually like more specific things about the immune system or certain reactions that might be going on, like some triggered ones. So maybe a medication can be also, it depends on also when you took the medication. Maybe it's not always 24 hours apart, sometimes it's 26 hours apart, sometimes it's only 18 hours apart. So a 3D printer might be able to adjust the medication more precisely, give you the optimal doses over long periods of time by changing how fast it dissolves or not, or other inactive ingredients and stuff that's going on. Another one you could do is we 3D printed with other chemicals for complex release, so depending on stomach acidity or past the stomach, so it doesn't harm your stomach as much, but maybe it releases it depending on certain enzymes are not present, and stuff like that for more complex chemistry to deliver the drugs in a better way with less side effects. Another idea that could happen is that you can make it so that it becomes either in a drink, powder or powder form, or food form more easily for people that have real aversions from just swallowing it. Now the thing is, normally a powder form of powder medicine is really dangerous because your body reacts more with stomach acid, or your body can absorb more rapidly even in your tongue, or stuff like that, and it can really overdose. But if you make it a powder form with a little bit of medication, surrounded by a thick surface layer of stuff that dissolves more slowly, that prevents you from absorbing it all at once, or you make it special so not all of it dissolves at, can cause the powder dissolve at different speed, you could potentially get around those problems and help people that have real swallowing difficulties or difficulties taking the medication, and make it more appealing to take pure medication. Another one you could do is you could do stuff for more security, such as you can make sure that you could put it at a certain address with a certain identifiable thing, and add all these extra security features, then it would normally delay you more if you were at the pharmacy picking up your medication to try and make it safer. Or you can have your medication, or you can print a little bit of medication at a bit so you don't have as much medication for someone to potentially steal or make money off of. And other security features like that to make it less worthwhile to steal it. Just some idea right there. Maybe some security codes to log in. Or this also lets you do more advanced chemistry at home with this product, which could do some amazing things. One, as I already named, is you could make chemicals that move the decay over time or something, or harder to store, and make them so you can take them within an hour after printing them for opening up a wide range of new medication. Another one is you could, if it does chemistry at home and makes new compounds, maybe you could update, it could make new drugs for you that have just been released or come out recently, or make a more wide variety of drugs. And it could do all this stuff maybe at a cheaper way and make it more affordable. And now having data on more types of drugs, release agents and everything, that potentially could also advance medicine more as more things are tried. And the last thing for this page is make more meds that break down, including the inactive ingredients, which can really make them super fast absorb if inactive ingredients break down. Or it can make it better protection for stomach acid and stuff. So some other things. It could help with at-home tests or custom meds. So you could also have these medications turn poop or pee blue or something, or you can make custom pills that you use to detect certain things or chemical reactions for certain tests. Or in the future, when we start making custom medications based on genes and genetics, we can make stuff that makes certain genes for gene or RNA treatments or RNA vaccines, maybe even in your house. That's much more futuristic in many ways. Like, this is all over the place, from futuristic to not so futuristic. Another thing that this could majorly help out with is if people have major anxiety leaving their houses and stuff like that, or picking up medication being seen, they don't have to leave the house as much, so that might really help with that type of anxiety. The last one I really want to say for over here is something I call, and other people have called online, the Adhd task, but to apply to other neurodivergence, it's the extra money people have to spend because they forget medication, or they forget something, they lose something, or they're being impulsive and stuff like that. So they can't, so instead, they have to maybe spend less money, spend more money on each little individual thing, because if they leave the food in the refrigerator, instead of buying food every day, that food will rot or something like that because they forgot about it, so it's better to buy a little thing. This could help with ADHD tasks by making a little bit of medication at a time or at certain intervals, or make the whole thing more memorable because you see it being printed, everything. It's more of an experience. So how would we end up doing all this great stuff, or maybe great stuff? Well, let me talk a little about the 3D printer for this. One is to design a 3D printer, something I'm going to call multi-nozzles. And by the multi-nozzles, idea is that it has multiple nozzles close together, either on the same little printing head or on separate printing heads, and these could cause you to print out the multiple chemicals without them mixing beforehand and reacting, or that they are not reacting as much, and you can switch over stuff without cleaning as much. So I think multi-nozzle designs will be very important, and we're getting better and better fabricating very small nozzles that are wear resistant and stuff like that. Another thing to locally heat or induce chemical reactions, or to locally put stuff together, fuse stuff together, is laser heating. It can be very accurate and very quick. But not only could we use lasers to reform everything, we can use lasers at different wavelengths of light, such as UV can do some chemical reactions without heating up too much, but microwaves can do some other chemical reactions, and they can heat up different materials differently. Another thing we could do, and also lasers can cause some polymers to polymerize, and which means turn them from like one state to another state where they're oftentimes are more solid. Could be a huge use there. Another thing you could do is you could add a blower function somewhere. And the blower function could blow air to either compact stuff so it becomes more fused together, to cool off stuff faster. It could also just use it to reshape stuff, but it could also use it to dry stuff out faster, to make it in a certain form if it comes out of its shell, which might be easier to pump through certain nozzles. Another thing that it could do, potentially, is use electric heating, a little tip that heats up places locally much hotter, or by some resistance, which can be replaced for more complex patterns. And also electricity provided by that tip could cause local reactions to happen that are very specific. By like electrolysis for one thing, but it's also like kind of the opposite, where electricity induces polymerization. Is when we take small molecules and make them into a much longer molecule. That's not an exact definition. There's more complex, better, longer definitions of that. For the tips and nozzles and stuff, to make them efficient, to use a non-stick ceramic coated metal or plastic. And ceramic non-stick coatings are really great in that they don't release a lot of toxic chemicals, and they can handle really high temperatures and don't get abraded as much. Now, if we could put it on plastic, that might even be better than metal because that's more flexible, but that's hard to do. But I'm sure somebody can figure it out, given enough time. Another one thing is we should try to hopefully design this whole device to be, in many ways, as small and compact as we can. Because if we do that with better electronics and stuff, we can save energy because you don't need as much energy to heat up or maintain conditions with everything. But it can also mean that we can take less space in someone's house if we want to keep a house. But maybe these things will not be at houses at the most advanced ones, but pharmacies and stuff for custom meds to pick up there. But the house ones would have some better uses as the things I've described before. Or it might be a mix of community centers and houses, and different places have different ones, with different levels of sophistication. Something that also needs to be really optimized is the speed of the nozzle, designed well if we're moving back and forth. And also precision, because that really affects how precise we can do all this release and stuff like that. It affects how long people have to wait in between medications. It lowers anxiety if stuff is fast, but also you don't want not too fast that that's imprecise too much. So you have that balance, and sometimes maybe you sacrifice one for the other one. So this last one is kind of, this eighth one, I'm sorry, not last one, smart coordinate systems like a game with a tree. I want to explain a lot more in depth what I mean by that, because it sounds a little, doesn't sound the best of what I'm trying to say. But we can make a 3D printer learn a certain algorithm to print stuff more efficiently, for moving back and forth in a more efficient pattern, so that it doesn't have to waste as much time, to making sure that when it attaches one layer of stuff, the layers might, when it's drying out, it might collapse, might make cracks normal, or not, depending on how you dry it out, or how you heat up a local layer might affect the heat, might heat up stuff nearby by accident, or certain stuff like that might happen. So printing something might affect other things, or shining light or anything, parts of it. So you have to take that into account when you're trying to design really fancy things. Also, like how much times, it's not simply printing back and forth. Because besides the heating and the problems, but sometimes if you're printing, it's faster to print one material first, even though you skip like stuff in between, so you don't go back and forth, but you take diagonals and stuff, so you don't have to switch out materials. But sometimes it's faster to switch materials and just go more in a continuous print and stuff like that. So all this printing stuff becomes really complicated. What's the fastest? Now this is very similar to a lot of actually problems with robust solving to learn to play a bunch of games such as chess, Go, and more. And what they did in these games that have a ton of possibilities is you design a tree where you start off with a starting point, and you go by, first you start a tree that goes into a bunch of different starting options. So maybe these different options are move up, so I'm going to just call pointing that way. Maybe another option is move down. Then it would go from each of these points, it'll take a movement option. And each of them, it's calculating some form of how good each option is. But it's effective based on the previous one. So let's say it's time. So each one, it calculates how much time it took at each step. Now, the problem with something so complicated is these trees will grow bigger and bigger, and forever, not forever, but for a long time, until they reach all possibilities. So what you do then is you make a neural network that instead learns based on these trees. It learns based on these trees what's a good direction. So it looks like, oh, normally it's a good direction to go in this direction. This one, maybe it's better to first go down or up. So it kind of learns based on like trying to take a bunch of guesses and hypotheses. What's a better guess? Then, instead of making a tree where it makes all the possibilities, it makes a tree where it looks at the most likely possibilities. Now, when you have the most likely possibilities, you're trying out less things. You can retrain a neural network to be better in a back and forth continuous thing. And then so you learn to expand what possibilities look at a tree and what not. And you also learn what possibilities you forget in a tree, so you delete some stuff. And then you delete stuff, saving your space and memory and stuff to make the whole thing faster. This is, hopefully that makes sense, but I'm trying to remember the name, but look up like if AlphaZero and AlphaGo, both, and AlphaFold, all different things, and there's different versions of AlphaFold, all different computer algorithms that use very similar things. AlphaGo was the original computer algorithm to be a human being at the game Go, and AlphaZero was an algorithm that was made to have less input than AlphaGo. AlphaGo had some input from human beings playing the Go game. AlphaZero had no input from human beings playing the Go game. AlphaFold is a similar algorithm for not doing proteins, not playing Go, but folding proteins. Okay. Another thing is for these things, we could add a chiller function to help print stuff that you need colder temperatures to, like certain more sensitive medications and stuff like that, or chemical reactions to control temperature. We could also include a heater, or to keep the printing more precise so the heat spreads less because everything is colder. These are just a couple of the limited uses, or you could store it in a 3D printer until you need it. So printer acts like a refrigerator too for your stuff. Another thing that could be done is you could use it to get rid of oxygen in the system much more efficiently. And getting rid of oxygen could have some huge advantages, such as when you get rid of oxygen, you make it so that the whole thing can have more sensitive chemical reactions and species and stuff like that, and make everything also last longer, because oxygen, remember, is one of the main things that breaks down stuff in the atmosphere. That's real. Another thing is by having your medicine, your 3D printer displaying the medicine you have on display more, in some ways it may hopefully normalize taking medicine and the whole thing about health, so people are less ashamed about it, fearful about it, and dispel some of the rumors around it. That's what I mean by normalizing it. Also, maybe to help the 3D printing it, you could spray a thin adhesive layer on the whole thing. In a thin adhesive layer, what it could do is you have to come out of adhesion, and that can help you either make the beginning of the thing by sticking it to the plate better, or less sticking it to a plate for different chemicals and stuff. So it just helps you build up the structure above it more. Or you can have really fancy different adhesion layers that maybe also pop out of a certain amount of time, so only adheres for a certain amount of time under certain conditions. They crack when they're cold. Stuff like that will make it have fancy support structures. Another thing that could really help out this whole thing is you could get it so that it blocks out a lot more light. Now, blocking out more light is very useful in a couple different ways. One is light. Light can break down a lot of chemicals and mess up a lot of chemical reactions. So blocking out light could make pills and stuff last longer. But it could also let you control light in the box more precisely to do the chemistry I said before. Having the whole device having sound blockers or something dampeners in some sort could let you print more precise things, much more precisely, because you get rid of the vibrations that might mess up your print quality, especially at the small scale that most medicine is actually made out of. Another potential thing that it could do, that I kind of forgot, is use acoustic things to locally alter structures or drive chemical reactions. So using sound vibrations to drive certain chemical reactions or strengthen certain things, cut certain features into the medicine. This is something actively looked at. I'm really listening to everything that comes to mind. So, another thing that could happen with this whole thing is you could also use it to control the pressure of the whole device by either spewing out stuff from the nozzle at a higher rate with higher pressure and hitting it against a harder surface, or seizing the whole pressure of the device, pumping in more or less air, or pumping out air. And different chemicals are more stable at different pressures. Some chemical reactions only happen at certain pressures, but also it could help compact the device, or repel more, or make it harder. It could affect cooling rate and heating rate. It can, besides heating and cooling rate, it could just also stabilize it afterwards. Another thing is maybe you would let more people 3D print generic stuff at home. We still have gone on the previous list. but also might make it more generic, and more people could maybe use this technology instead of a big lab that's making everything. So, another thing along these lines is it could attract more home fascinations into designing and making medications. Now, these home fascinations could be very, very important because that means that more people will get interested in building 3D printers and other devices, but it could also mean that more people get into making farm tech and pharmacy stuff, and that the whole field will advance more rapidly from an early age as people learn more at a younger age. You could also have, with this technology, more at-home, what I'm going to call, at-home quality checks, where the device itself has a bunch of sensors to check the quality of all the medications and stuff, and make sure that it's up to par, much more than the big ones, where stuff might vary more. They might take 1 out of a million pills, not 1 out of every pill. Another thing this whole thing could lead to is another thing we could use in this device is sensor control to sense vibrations or local conditions more, and preciseness, and to get rid of calibration, so you don't have to calibrate it precisely on the mat every time. And this could lead to more precisely manufactured things. You could also have it pump in different chemicals, from ozone to hydrogen peroxide to chemicals you supply, ethanol and stuff, throughout the system whenever you need to clean it, so medications don't mix up. This is more of a practical recommendation again. You could have the whole thing vibrate too with the sonic equipment if you attach it beforehand to clean itself better. Because sonic ones can break up particles more than might be sticking, break up surface tension, break up certain types of big molecules, stuff like that. Another one we could do is pump air through the whole thing at high pressures and blow it to clean the device, which I call air cleaning here. And if you really want to clean it out, maybe you have whole pieces that can just be replaced. So there's no contaminants. So here's some adjacent ideas I've talked about. One is that maybe put in genetically modified organisms that release the drugs and stuff into your body over very long periods of time by colonizing your gut or something, or they can have fancier control by sensing body chemistry, other chemistry, or even times of day with circadian rhythms. Some bacteria have circadian rhythms, so it can really precisely come up with a plan for you and how to release it. Now, also genetically modified organisms can make much more fancier drugs than we can do without organisms or genetic engineering. They can also make it much more individualized, and they can make drugs that are much more unstable because they don't have to pass through the whole digestive tract or hit stomach acid, and they can make it in the digestive tract an unstable thing that might only last an hour but continues to give it to you for days to years, potentially. An idea that is totally not 3D printing, except for if you include 3D printing at big pharmacies or something, would be to do this, but with, how would I say it? To ship packages that are fake labels for your medications when you ship packages. Now, the whole idea about shipping packages like this is a simple fact that doing this so would mean that people are less likely to steal your medications or feel less motivated. Now, beyond the feeling less motivated, you could do it with also fake names, or you could even if you really want to, trick people. You could ship packages with that say are medications that are not, so people get less trusting when they steal medications because they've been tricked a couple times, or know they could be being tricked. This also could be in privacy in certain households. So it's just like sometimes they do something accidentally for birth control, and they want other people in the household to know they're on birth control. We could also be talking about in the future for potential different ways of administrating stuff is using this with gels instead, where you can put up certain body parts, or you swallow a pill that coats something in gel, or besides swallowing a pill that coats something in gel, trying to think about what else. You could have it just on your skin, and this could more administer medicine to a local area that has that problem. Or skin can absorb certain medications better that might affect the digestive tract more, or it could act more as a physical barrier where you digestive tract and do stuff. Or gels can let in chemicals that into the inside of them that trigger a response that changes the gel, that changes how it releases or does stuff within the gel. And maybe you could 3D print the gels and stuff and change the appearances of the gel. Another thing you could do with this whole thing is you could put gel surfaces within pills or on the outside of pills to more protect them or make them easier to swallow, or protect the gel inside the pill. And the gel normally will be dispersed in a bad way and hard to handle. So the two kind of opposite things. Now you could also get maybe in the future custom medications for slight things. So like, I'm not saying like usually if you need custom meds, it's for something major. Let's say you're taking Dayquil, NyQuil, which has a couple different drugs in it, but you make it just slightly different depending on symptoms you put in. So it better treats it with less side effects. Something else I think that could help in the future with medication is mini ultra-cold fridges for so like the COVID vaccines. Some of them need ultra-cold temps to be stored. Stuff like that, but you can restore medications that are hard to store if we had mini ultra-cold fridges at home. And maybe more. No oxygen fridges would be a similar thing to help store medication and stuff. And maybe some foods better for not spoiling. No water fridges, similar. Now that would also dry out raw food, so it's not as good for food storage, but some foods maybe. Now if you're pumping out the oxygen already, you might as use it as well for other stuff for home uses, for just making a burner more quickly, better for cooking. You might use it for people with breathing difficulties, or certain, can help with certain times of people with migraines, seizures, then it can make it worse. But there could be uses for that oxygen if you pull out the oxygen from a place for using for something different. These refrigerators could also have different pressure settings, which could be hugely useful in many ways. So the different pressure settings can make some chemicals last longer or not last as long. Pressure can make molecules less likely to fall apart because they're present together. But they can also fuse molecules together that are too small, or they can cause something more likely to catch on fire or something at other times. So it's complicated, but also low pressure can prevent organism growth, or it can keep stuff more dry, stuff from spoiling that way. So it's complicated, like many things. And another one is just a better apps and reminders fused in with all the stuff to help people just remember to take the medication, but also more precise times a day where it might